In the spotlight tonight, the state of Florida versus George Zimmerman, who has pled not guilty by reason of self-defense in the second-degree murder of Trayvon Martin. Perhaps one of the most important evidentiary points established today in the prosecution's case is the exact position of Trayvon Martin's body after he was shot and killed by George Zimmerman. The prosecution accomplished this through the testimony of Sergeant Anthony Raimondo. It was during Raimondo's testimony that the jury of 6 women saw for the first time Trayvon Martin's body. Because of the position the body is a crucial aspect of this case, we are now going to show you 3 pictures of Trayvon Martin's body, the pictures that were shown to the jury today. These pictures and the accompanying testimony were disturbing enough to Trayvon Martin's father that he left the courtroom. Trayvon Martin's mother stayed in the room, but she looked away when the pictures were exhibited. You certainly have that option of looking away now, too. The first photograph is at the very beginning of what I'm going to show you. Here is the testimony of Sergeant Anthony Raimondo.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of the way Trayvon Martin's body was positioned when you approached it?
Yes, sir, it is.
Did you see any movement from Trayvon Martin's body as you approached him?
No, sir, I did not.
After you rolled his body over onto his back, did you again try to get a pulse?
Yes, sir, I did.
How did you do that?
Same carotid area, sir.
And were you able to get a pulse?
No, sir, I was not.
All right. What did you do next?
I breathed for Mr. Martin, or I tried to, sir.
Did you hear anything when you were performing CPR on Trayvon Martin?
Yes, sir.
What was that?
Bubbling sound, sir.
And what did those bubbling sounds indicate to you?
It meant that either air was getting into or escaping from the chest in a manner that it was not supposed to, sir.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's Mr. Martin's body, sir.
And is that in the way it appeared after he was pronounced dead in your efforts and Officer Ayala's efforts at CPR?
Yes, sir.
Sergeant Raimondo then explained what he did after Trayvon Martin was pronounced dead.
Trayvon Martin was pronounced dead. Did you or anyone else put anything over his body?
Yes, sir.
And what was that?
I put an emergency blanket over Mr. Martin's body, sir.
And what was the purpose of that?
Well, 1, it was respect for the deceased. 2, is to mitigate trauma that witnesses or family members may be exposed to if they arrived on scene. And then 3 was to preserve any physical evidence on the body, sir.
Is that how Trayvon Martin's body appeared after you placed the medical blanket on top of it?
Yes, sir.
Also testifying today was Celine Bahadur, who said she saw what appeared to be a fight outside her window.
And if you could describe to the jury what you saw at that time.
I saw what looked as figures and arms flailing.
Okay. Figures, meaning more than one figure?
Yes.
And at the time that you first observed the 2 individuals, were the individuals erect, standing? Were they on the ground? Were they crouched? How would you describe the individuals?
They're in a standing position.
Joining me now, Faith Jenkins, a former criminal prosecutor, and from Sanford, Florida, AP reporter Kyle Hightower. Faith, I want to get to the 2 photographs we saw there that show the position of the body. The one that was the undisturbed version that what the officer arrived at showed Trayvon Martin's arms under his body.
Right.
This is a crucial piece of evidence, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because George Zimmerman has already given statements saying that after he shot Trayvon, he spread his arms out and spread them on the ground, and when the officers got there, Trayvon was actually face down, lying in the cold, wet grass alone with his arms underneath him. You cannot underestimate the powerful evidence in seeing those pictures and those jurors seeing those pictures. This case became very real for them today. The second-degree murder charge is no longer just a stamp on a piece of paper that that's someone's child, someone's brother, friend, and student who laid down in that grass that night and died alone. And that emotional aspect of his testimony was so powerful in court today.
Kyle Hightower, you were in the courtroom today. As I said, Trayvon Martin's father left the room right after that testimony and those photographs, and his mother, of course, was looking away when the photographs were shown. Tell us about the feelings in the courtroom at that time. What was your sense of how the jury was experiencing this?
Well, definitely when Trayvon Martin's father, Tracy Martin, left the courtroom, several turned his direction to see. It was undeniable his immediate reaction to seeing, you know, those pictures, just catching a glimpse of those pictures. When he got up and he was, you know, hands to eyes, I mean, he was definitely affected. And several jurors, like I said, looked over in his direction and saw the emotion he was going through. And
Kyle, do we know if this was the first time that Trayvon Martin's parents saw those photographs?
It is. These are the first crime scene photos that were shown to the jurors, and as Faith said, they were very impactful and left an impression on the jury. You know, their notebooks were there, they were drawn, they were writing, they were taking notes, but they were also, when those pictures were shown, they stopped in their tracks and they were looking at that screen.
And Faith, my sense of Sergeant Raimundo is that I felt an emotional undercurrent to his testimony, too. This was the guy who gave CPR to Trayvon Martin. He did it literally mouth to mouth. He didn't rush back to his car to get the protection that they sometimes use, often use for that. And it seemed like he was delivering himself an emotional connection to the scene.
This is a police officer with years of experience who has probably seen and heard it all, who testified and who's probably testified hundreds of times in court. And today he was moved when he talked about how he tried to revive Trayvon as he lay there trying to breathe. Not having any family around him, no one around him, George Zimmerman walking around pretty much emotionless the way they described him, and this officer tried to save his life. He didn't.
And Kyle, what about the effect of the eyewitness testimony? She didn't get into much real specifics other than to establish that she seemed to see two figures standing, arms flailing, and then she herself testified that she turned away, didn't she?
She did, and you know, that obviously had an impact on the jury. You know, they were again taking notes, but the defense recognized it too, I believe, because they were, you know, they attacked, you know, her assertion that, you know, she heard movement that would seem to suggest that George Zimmerman was moving away from his vehicle and toward Trayvon Martin at the time of their encounter, and that goes definitely in the favor of the prosecution's theory that he was pursuing and following Trayvon Martin. So the defense definitely had to attack that assertion.
Faith, the judge is considering whether to allow previous 911 calls by George Zimmerman to be introduced as evidence. This was always the plan, and the defense could have objected to this earlier, but they didn't object to it until today. What's the significance of it? What are the stakes for each side in that decision?
In order to prove second-degree murder, the state has to show Zimmerman operated with ill will or a depraved mind. They're saying that these tapes go to show that, because the night that Trayvon was killed, when he referred to him, he talked about him. Trayvon was alone. Remember that. He was walking alone. But Zimmerman talked about him as if he were with a group of people. These a-holes always get away, more than one person. These expletive punks, again, more than one person. So he had an attitude about Trayvon. He attributed an attitude to Trayvon based on experiences he had with prior people who he didn't think belonged in his neighborhood.
Faith Jenkins and Kyle Hightower, thank you both for joining me tonight. Coming up, there's a new senator from the state of Massachusetts elected tonight, but I don't have to tell you who he is. I told you who was going to win that race months ago. And in the rewrite tonight, the people who are trying to rewrite the law on treason.